I'm the boss. Dump everything that isn't about fine dining. Everything? Everything. Come on, come on, come on. Quicker, quicker. Delete, delete. Come on, let's get moving. Hurry up, what do you think I'm paying you for? You don't pay me. You don't even exist. We're just a clever visual metaphor used to personify the abstract concept of thought. One more crack like that and you're out of here. No, please! I have 3 kids. You are the...
Stop joking. Tell him your name.
My name? What's his name? What's his name? I got nothing on a name. Come on, baby, what's the name? We threw out his name!
That video was my interpretation of exam day. If you've ever sat for an exam, you already know how it feels to cram as much information in as you can. And then it gets to exam day and you sit in front of that computer and nothing comes out. So don't get caught up like this on exam day. So when you study, make sure you don't throw out all of the information that you already knew beforehand. So, good morning. I want to thank you for coming to my presentation today. How is everyone doing? I know it's early, very early in the morning, but I do appreciate you participating and giving me feedback. So today's presentation is over the Weerhoff Van Gießen stain. Now, for some reason, when I say the name of the stain, I feel like high society. Weerhoff Van Gießen. For some reason, it just popped into my head. So this is going to become the theme of the presentation, okay? So my preferred name is Kay. You can find me on social media as Kay Gordon. So if you ever want to reach out to me, you can inbox me there. I am in 2 Facebook groups that I admin. Those are my babies, the Histotechnology Visual Study Group, as well as the Histotechnology After Dark. Those are both my Facebook group, and I want to give a shout out to the HTHTL ASCP study group. I do moderate that group as well. You can also find me over there. Part of a Histotech is also me. If you see me on social media, on TikTok or on Instagram, that is where I am also located. And I'm also the secretary of the Missouri Society for Histotechnology. So I am just a regular girl from the Midwest who happens to like herself some histology, okay? So before we get into the VVG, when you are reading about any of the special stains, and this is for exam preparation, you want to be sure to touch on each part of the stain. When she goes into the background of the stain, the principle of the stain, and pay attention to even the procedure of the stain, and definitely don't forget those technical notes, okay? Because the exam is going to have questions to touch on 3 main taxonomies. Those are our basic recall. Those are just facts. You're not doing anything with information. You're just pulling a fact from memory. Your application and analysis, that's what you do with the information. And your evaluation is your ability to judge what happened and how to fix it, which is very important in histology. That's going to fall under our troubleshooting. And a lot of that comes from the technical notes. So when you're going through these staining chapters, really pay attention to each of the subheadings that Carson has laid out. If she's talking about quality assurance, that may mention if the stain is a one and done. Like once you create it or use that reagent, that's it for the stain. Maybe you can reuse it. Maybe it's only good for like a week, something like that. The application and the purpose goes back to why the pathologist would order this stain. What is he going to diagnose with this stain? And the principle and chemistry are part of the application analysis as well. Pay close attention to any types of oxidation or reduction, parts that are integral to the principle of the stain that are going to kind of help you mentally work through their procedure. So when you can't remember exactly how a step is, we have to do oxidation before we do a reduction step, those things like that. And also connected to the big picture. You're not just looking at the elastic stain here. We are inside of the connective and muscle tissue chapter. So we want to make sure that we are keeping along for the ride those other connective tissue fibers. Know that there are three of them. That is a very simple recall question that you might get asked on the exam. Between that elastic reticulin and the collagen, those all have their own unique set of stains to demonstrate them as well. So if you studied in chunks, when you recall one stain, the others will follow. So don't just say this is just an elastic stain. They all belong together as a group. Okay. So when you think of one, they can all come into focus. Okay. So getting into the purpose. So this is the purpose directly from the Carson text. She's going to get into a little bit of the background. She may or may not get into what exactly the tissue element is or what it's for, but she tells us that it is to demonstrate pathologic changes and fragmentation and reduplication. So she will outline the purpose at the beginning of each stain, and there will be always nuggets of information that can be pulled for the exam. You may even skip reading it. Don't skip reading it. Just take that little bit of information in for what it is, and it may even prompt you to go ahead and do some further reading. She may not necessarily get into a disorder or describe it or even name it. She's just going to tell you that it has something to do with reduplication of elastic tissues or some type of atrophy or fragmentation. And you might go and say, well, what's the name of that particular disorder? You might want to go and do some further reading and research the name of that. Because on the exam, they may ask you the name and see if you can associate the name to the test that it would help demonstrate. And also note that the VVG is a combination of two stains. So we have one to highlight the elastic fibers and then the Van Giesen counter stain to highlight collagen and muscle. We have to have a context in pathology. It's not just about what it is. We want to know where it is, the extent of it. Because a result without meaning, we can't really act on that. So we need to know where it fits in, and then the appropriate counter stain is going to show us the other features. Yes, these elastic fibers are broken up, but where are they broken up? Is where in the tissue does this sit? So what can a pathologist use the VVG to diagnose? So I have a few diagnoses sitting here on the screen. So kind of look through those and see if you can pick out a few that the VVG would help diagnose. Some of these are not correct. They do not belong here. But we're going to see if we can link some of these diagnoses to this particular stain and its use. And also, could you recall an elastic stain if need be? Because the exam is multiple choice. So the answer is always in front of you. And sometimes the detractors have one thing in common. None of them are elastic stains, but if you are familiar with other stains that also perform the same function, you can probably navigate your way through that question. So, did we think of different diseases that the VVG can help diagnose? Let's see. Okay, so this is a list of a few conditions that the VVG can help diagnose. See some of those that are on the list, and these are some alternatives to the VVG stain. You never know, it might be on back order and it's something that we might have to go to a sister lab. They may perform any one of these other stains, and the pathologist may choose one of those other stains to get him what he needs. So here are a few questions pulled from the information. I was able to pull out 6 questions just from that small bit of information in the principle of the stain. So I'm going to look here at these two questions and see if we can come up with the answers to those questions. Yeah. So the primary purpose of the Virchow Van Giesen stain is to visualize elastic fibers in normal and diseased tissues. And the second one was a stain that's not commonly used is the Ziehl-Neelsen acid fast. You can see the other three choices all have something in common. The names are very similar, which means we're using the same dyes and they probably can demonstrate the same things. Okay, two more questions here. Okay, so what is the most likely reason for a pathologist to order the stain? So he wants to evaluate internal elastic lamina for fragmentation or reduplication. And but about the next question? The least likely to be evaluated is iron deficiency anemia. The VVG is for elastic fibers, and elastic fibers and iron deficiency just that they don't go together. This is not an iron stain. Two more questions. Okay, so why might he order a VVG on a carcinoma? To assess tumor invasion into the blood vessels. Yes, that is correct. And A is for the elastic fibers in the skin. So the pseudo xanthoma elasticum. Even if you didn't know anything about this, which I had no idea about that particular diagnosis either, you can pretty much guess elasticum may have something to do with an elastic stain. I think that would be the best guess if you just had to guess at it. Okay, so the principle of the stain, this is the principle from Carson. So know that there are over 20 different types of elastic stains. And this one has survived 5 editions of Carson. We are introduced to hematoxylin as being more than a nuclear stain. We have an oxidation, an additional Morton that is included in this particular protocol. Differentiation methods like excess of the mordant, because before when we wanted to differentiate a stain, if it was an acid stain, we'd hit it with a basic chemical and the opposite to get that to kind of de-stain itself. But this is how we differentiate with using excess of the mordant. The use of other chemicals that are not part of the stain to clean up the stain. We're talking about sodium thiosulfate, which we're using to remove that excess iodine. And the counter stain that can be used alone as need be. But it's a good stain to highlight staining in general. So here in the photo, we've got our gentleman. He is overly dressed for a day at the lake. He's wearing a sweater, multiple pairs of sunglasses, and he's just chilling in that lake, Lake Hemazoxylin there. We got the iodine and the ferric chloride waiting at the sidelines to get in and create that dye lake there with hematoxylin. And that's how the principle of the stain is. Okay. So the reagents. So in the reagents for the VVG stain, we have alcoholic hematoxylin, that is our dye, ferric chloride, Lugol's iodine, which are used as mordants and oxidizers. Those 3 together make the Virchow stain. We also have ferric chloride again in a different concentration being used as a differentiator. The thiosulfate reagent is used to remove excess iodine, and then our Van Giesen is our counter stain. So it's a pretty simple stain. Procedure. If you look at this procedure stepwise, do you see anything that is out of place with this procedure? Yeah, I see a few things, plenty of things. Yeah, let's talk about it. Well, first, we know that Van Giesen is a counterstain, so it probably shouldn't be applied first. Secondly, the differentiation of the Van Giesen does not need to be done microscopically. We would microscopically differentiate after the Virchow. The sodium thiosulfate is there to remove the iodine, which we have not placed it at this point, so that's out of place. Place sections in Virchow elastic tissue for 1 hour. That is too far down in the procedure. That probably should have been more at the top. And alcohol does not differentiate Virchow. We differentiate that with ferric chloride. So this procedure is definitely out of order. So here is the actual procedure. When you work through a protocol, the steps should make sense. When you understand what reagent's role is and what's needed to do that, it deepens your understanding of the stain. So what happens before, during, and after each step should be fully understood, even things that are not mentioned. We are staining, so what would the slide look like at each step? What would happen if this step was missed or done out of order? Just like dominoes falling, each step should push the next one. So you have your procedure in a stepwise, and when you read your special stains, do study the procedures. Make sure that you understand why this step had to happen when it did. Okay? And this is our visual for our procedure. We're going to overstain in Virchow's. See him there, overly dressed again. And then we're going to differentiate with excess Morton of ferric chloride. Okay? He's got a little bit undressed there. He's lost a little clothing. Then we're going to remove excess iodine. And we're going to remove the excess iodine with sodium thiosulfate. And at the end, we should have a nice polished stain, very crisp lines of elastic fibers with a good contrast between the collagen and muscle fibers, with your collagen being red and your muscle fibers being yellow. So we have this nice refined gentleman sitting behind this in front of his wondrous car. This so cute, so cute. I love creating the visuals for these. Few more questions. After overstaining with Verhoeven's hematoxylin, which reagent is used to remove excess dye and reveal elastic fibers? That would be the ferric chloride, because we're going to remove that excess dye. We are differentiating here. You see how they didn't use the word differentiate? They just said remove excess dye. That is differentiation. So that would be the ferric chloride's job. Next question. Why do elastic fibers remain black after differentiation while most other tissues lose the stain? They form a particularly stable complex with the iron hematoxylin lake. Elastic fibers like that hematoxylin stain. They like it. So they're going to hold on to that stain very strongly while the other tissue elements just, they lose it, they destain it. It's not stable on the other tissue elements. In which three agents form a staining solution in the Virchow component of the VVG stain? This is a basic recall question. You don't have to know what each of the reagents do. We just have to know what they are. Right, hematoxylin, ferric chloride, and iodine. So why is iodine added to the Virchow solution? to oxidize the hematoxylin and to help form a Morton dye complex. Two more questions. A slide shows pale elastic fibers and very light background after VVG staining. Which step is most likely at fault? Over differentiation or weak hematoxylin solution. If you over differentiate, your elastic fibers are not going to be black like they should be, and that picric acid fusion is just going to knock the rest of that stain right on out. So why is VVG described as a regressive method rather than a progressive one? That's right. The entire section is overstained first, then an excess dye is removed until only structures with the highest affinity remains. Okay. And the results. What should the stain look like? The elastic fibers are blue-black to black. They have been stained with an iron hematoxylin, which gives them a black color. The nuclei are blue to black. Again, they have been stained by the iron hematoxylin. Your collagen is red and your other tissue elements are yellow. Those two things were stained by the Van Giesen counterstain, which stains collagen red because of the acid fusion that is in there, and the other tissue elements are stained yellow because of the picric acid. So the technical notes, I call that the after party. These are nuggets of information. So don't skip the technical notes. Make sure you read every technical note and understand why it's there on each stain that you come across. It's almost as if it had no place else to be within the stain, but it's very important. So the first technical note is about over differentiating the stain. It lets you know what you need to look for during the stain. So when you are differentiating and you're checking under the scope, this is what you should see. And over differentiation can be fixed. So she's telling us that we can fix it up until a certain point, and it's also letting us know the reasoning for the 95% alcohol rinse. That's to set the stain. So after it's touched that alcohol, you're not pulling any more color out of that. It's going to set the stain, and it's going to start that dehydration process and really trap those dyes in. So the next technical note is about prolonged staining with the Van Giesen solution. This is part of the reason why it's overstained to begin with, because it's going to continue to destain as it goes through those other acids. So number 4 lets us know about the necessity of removing mercury deposits. Even though we're not using any mercury-based fixatives, she's letting you know if you did, you don't have to worry about removing those mercury deposits. Do you know why it's not necessary to remove mercury deposits? Because how you remove mercury pigment is to treat the sections in iodine, followed by sodium thiosulfate. So we've done all that with this tissue section. So there's no need to remove mercury pigment because part of how to remove mercury pigment is actually built into the protocol. The preparation of the Van Giesen solution this is one of the troubleshooting steps for the Van Giesen. So if you notice that your connective tissue, cytoplasm, and muscle are staining the same color, it's because the picric acid solution was not fully saturated. And when something is fully saturated, when they prepare that, you want to make sure that there are just a few particles of picric acid that has not been able to dissolve in that solution. That means it's just a little bit left over. And if it's not entirely saturated, the stain is very uncontrolled and very uneven. So you're not going to get the desired results that you want if your picric acid is not properly saturated. So to prepare the elastic stain solution, remember we had our alcoholic hematoxylin, our ferric chloride, and our iodine. So we have to mix that in order for proper oxidation. Lugol's iodine is a very weak oxidizer. It is not as strong as ferric chloride. So if you allow that to start the oxidation process first, you're going to get your stain will be unstable. So you have to let that ferric chloride get in there first to have first dibs on that oxidation so that we can make a much more stronger dilate. And then she's giving us a little trick for cleaning up. So if you've got some of that 2% ferric chloride left over, before you pour that out, swish that around that jar that had that Verhoff's hematoxylin in there and let that ferric chloride pull that dye out the jar as you wash it. And then letting us know that if you're differentiating, don't look at the control tissue. Look at your patient tissue. You don't want to differentiate based on the control because your patient tissue may be different. It may be a completely different type of tissue and it needs to be differentiated a little more or a little less. So pay attention to the control. And until you become a master at the stain, it's okay to cut an extra section to stain right along with that other stain until you get it right. So some study tips for you, okay? Because the goal is to pass that exam, right? Okay. So when you're sitting down with this information and you're studying, you want to chunk that information together. So chunking is when you group like subjects together to learn them in the same block. So if we're going to study connective tissue stains, we're going to study them together as a unit. Don't start something with connective tissue and then pull a nerve stain in there. Try to chunk that information together so that they all fit. Attach meaning to the information. Ask yourself, why is this important? And does this remind me of something that I already know? Or lastly, how would I know this? When you are doing your VOC questions or your workbook questions, and they ask you a question and they give you the answer, you're like, huh, well, how would I have known that? And then they will even tell you what chapter and page number it's on. And sometimes you'll go back and read, and it's right there in bold print, exactly what the question and answer was. So it's something that you just wasn't paying attention to the first time around you read it, or is this something that you read and did not understand it, or you did not interpret it correctly? And when you get ready to finally sit in front of your exam, and it is exam day, you're there, you have studied, you have rested, you are prepared, you have done everything to the letter, and you feel like this is your time. And you sit down in front of that computer screen and everything is blank. Just like SpongeBob at the beginning of the video, everything is blank. And you're trying to remember, oh my gosh, it's a stain. It's a stain. What does it do? Widen the scope. Don't just say, oh my God, it's an elastic stain. Okay, I can't think of the name of the elastic stain, but I know that elastic tissue, we also have reticulin tissue, we have collagen tissue. Okay, that was in the connective stain chapter. Okay, what other stains were in that chapter? And then you might be able to list a few stains. You're like, well, that was that Verhoeven and Gießen stain. And you say, oh, that's my elastic stain. Sometimes we are too close to the question and we're zeroing in on just that one thing, and it doesn't allow us to see the big picture, like I said earlier in the presentation. Sometimes you have to widen the scope back to the big picture to help you recall those little tiny details. Recall what you do know. Think of what you do know for sure and why it is. If you know connective tissue stains with acid dyes, and they're giving you answer choices, and those dyes are not acid dyes, then you know that that's not your choice. So whatever choice you pick, make it make sense. Does this fall in between the parameters of what I know for sure? And if it doesn't, it's probably not the right answer. And should you happen to read a question and an answer pops into your mind, and there it is one of the choices, 9 times out of 10, it is the correct answer. You knew that and you were able to recall that from your memory before you even read the four choices. So go with your first mind. This is your subconscious recalling information for you. So I got that ball of yarn sitting up there in the corner that represents something that triggers your memory. It is a string of information. So once you start pulling at that one small detail that's kind of hanging out, everything else just comes right along with it. So this is why it's important when you're studying that you link that information together. String it together as much as you possibly can. So that when one bit of information comes out, everything's going to tumble out right along with it, and you shall do fine on your exam. So, do we have any questions or any comments? And I mean, if you do, that's fine. If you don't, that's okay. Again, I am Kay Gordon. You can reach me on Facebook if you would like to message me or inbox me anything. You can find me in any one of those Facebook groups if you like to. I do want to thank you for your time and um and just thanks for your feedback. So if you have anything that you want to add or let me know or just kind of drop a line or a compliment or two, feel free. You can leave it in the comments or you can inbox me. And thank you so much. I hope we can do this again soon. Okay.